Oh, me. Oh, and also, and Brian, I told you about this. Next week, on the program, we're going to have a little short spot with our friend Tony Giese at Heritage Auctions because there is a championship belt that is coming up for auction through Heritage. It's one of the old NWA. Well, it was World. Help me with this now, Brian. It was big time wrestling back before world class wrestling, but nobody would know that for the purpose of this exercise. But the Dallas office, Fritz von Erich's World Class Wrestling, when it was still big time wrestling, member of the NWA, they had the American Tag Team Championship as their regional title. And one of those title belts from the 70s is coming up for auction at Heritage Auctions later on in April. And we're going to have Tony on to talk a little bit about that. But it's one of the old Nikita Milkovich belts. And he made the ones that I've got replicas of that I just love, the NWA World Tag title belts that the Midnight Express first held in 1986 when we worked for Crockett, that they'd been using since the 70s. And I'm pretty sure, well, yes, a lot of people would know the late 70s WWF title belt. I think the last one that Bruno wore, and then he dropped it to Graham, right? That was a Nikita Milkovich,
right?
That belt. And I just love the way they look because this guy, he put more bells and whistles on these things. So anyway, that belt is coming up for one of those belts is coming up for auction. And we're going to talk about that next week on the program also. So we got all that going for us. Now I've mixed up my notes. What is your favorite championship belt of all time?
I don't know. I never really think of belts that way. I'm not a belt mark. I'm not someone who goes out of my way to buy a replica or a real belt.
I'm not trying to get you to expose your vulnerability to sentimentality over a fucking material object. What I'm saying is, what do you like the style of, the look of more than most? Because now they've just got where they all either look the same or it's just blah. But in the old days, they had belts back then in the old days, CB.
The Winged Eagle belt, which was the first belt that when I became a big fan, Hulk Hogan had, then the Warrior had. People had it until Austin. That's a favorite because to me that meant the World Championship. Again, that was around longer than most versions of the WWF Championship ever was. I really like that. The NWA TV title was kind of cool because it was red. That's really it. I'm not a belt guy.
Oh, come on. All right. Well, let me just jump in here then. I think I've told this story before, so I won't go into detail, but the championship belt that I think, honestly, was the most unique, the nicest looking, the most, it had class, was the Thez NWA belt, the small one, that they used in the 40s and 50s.
The Strangle Lewis belt?
Well, the small one with the little, but the diamonds around each one of these circular plates and the fucking ring with the wrestlers in the middle and the whole 9 yards. And I guess they used that until the mid 50s. And because he's with that belt on the cover of a lot of the early 50s magazines and calendars.
I actually do like the one that they had, that Kaniski had, that Dory Funk Jr. had before, the one that people seem to have fallen in love with. It's the one they brought back, but the one right before that, the late 60s NWA Championship.
Yes, well, and Thez had that one his last run.
That's right.
Also, and I like that one, but I love that old Thez belt because it looks like something that would have been given to a prize fighter in the 20s and 30s. And it had elegance. Elegance is the word that I was looking for to it. And you could believe that it was a real piece of jewelry, right? And to so much so that I tried to check into getting a replica, slightly altered, obviously, of that belt made when Sinclair bought Ring of Honor. And when they looked at the pictures and the designs and everything, they said, well, here's the problem. There's so many of the tiny jewels and the tiny diamonds and the way that it was intricately done that it would have cost today to replicate with fake jewels, just the work, like 10 or 12 grand to do this. Everything. Okay. but I love that belt as far as any belt that any of my guys ever had. As I mentioned, I love the NWA World Tag Title belts with the Nikita Milkovich versions, and those are the ones that Manny and Rude ended up with and then took off with. But Flair and Valentine and the Andersons and all the great teams had those things, and they weighed 20 pounds apiece. But when they were done, when they were made or redone, when they were new, they looked fantastic on television. And I mean, they had some oomph to them and still had that kind of old style. And as a fan, my favorite belt and it was so simple, but it was, again, so historic, was the old Southern Junior Heavyweight title belt that Nick Goulas started. They had a tournament in Birmingham, I think, in 1952, and they used that belt until 1976, when I think Jarrett ended up getting another one to replace that one, and he gave Lawler that one to take home with him because he'd had it for so long at that point. And then later on, it got stolen at a fucking appearance that Lawler was doing. But it had actually not only, it was completely a unique design that had never been done before, because they just had that belt made by some metal worker. And they just made one up, right? But the side plates had actually the legitimate names of people who had won it and the dates engraved in it until they ran out of room. And you'd see Jackie Fargo and Ray Stevens, Brother Frank Jers, whatever the fuck, all through the 1950s. It was very cool piece of history. Everything now looks the same, and the fans can get as high quality of a title belt as the boys have. And it just, in olden days, the nice ones carried a little bit more prestige because they were more unusual and unique. You're not a fucking sentimentalist.
Yes, I am.
Are you a mentalist?
I'm that too. I have cosmic consciousness. But no, I'm into sentimental things. It's just for wrestling belts, probably because just the way they've been interchangeable for so many years, I've never seen it that way. I do like the belt that Bob Backlund had, that the Sheik won, that Hogan won, the green one with all the different nameplates of the champions on the side. I always did like that one too.
Well, that got a little, the nameplates at one point, it looked kind of like a fucking wall of fame at a goddamn sports hall of fame or something. It was a little much. It was a little large, a little gaudy, a little ostentatious, don't you think?
Hey, what do you think? I mean, this is kind of in the similar vein conversation. Before every IWGP championship match I've seen in the last few years, on the video screen, they run through every champion in history to get to this point. What do you think of the idea of doing that for a world championship, showing everyone who won the belt before you actually have the championship match?
I think that's tremendous, because it gives a sense of history. And, maybe the newer fans that may not have been following whatever company, that anybody that would do that long can kind of get curious. And especially, if you've got your library and a streaming service or whatever, where they can go back and check out but yeah, it gives history to it. I mean, of course, now think about if the WWE did it, you'd have goddamn fucking hoo-ha. I mean, it would be a million names. They've changed that belt, and then they split the belts. So then it's not as prestigious as it used to be to ever be the WWE champion, because they've changed it so many times, and so many potentially questionable people over the last 10 or 15 years have held one version of it at least. Whereas in the first, from 1963 and Bruno, Koloff, Pedro, Stasiak, Bruno again, Graham, Backlund. From 1963 until 1984, there were seven champions, and one guy, Bruno, held it twice. So that means there were 6 different people in 21 years. There would be, 30 or 35 in the last 20 years, before they decided to start making it prestigious again with Roman. So it might be unwieldy to do that.
When Austin won the title in '98 at WrestleMania from Shawn, I thought, okay, he's now going to get some long title reign. And it wasn't that at all. Like, that's when the era of nonstop title changes started.
Yeah, I wonder who was around then whispering in people's ear.